clients, and as much as I would like to send something off to the mastering engineer that represents exactly what I want it to be, that's never going to be loud enough for the client, period. That's the real world situation we all live in. I don't care what form of music you make. So I got into a habit of putting something on my master bus just for the client. If I'm working with a young rapper, let's say Meek Mill, what I'm playing for him is really squash compared to what I'm sending off to mastering. That's just for a loudness thing, number one. Number two, I am trying to say that my mastering engineer is better at mastering than me. And I think people forget the point of just loudness, but also EQ. So I have to give a lot of space in order for you to EQ my records the way that I want them done, which sort of becomes difficult in this world of single-driven things, or things that we're just putting one song or two songs up. Everyone's not delivering a full album anymore. Or we're at this point where artists are putting out a song to see if they can further their career, but it's just that one song. So I'm leaving room for EQ, for what I consider the mastering process. Again, if I was as good at it as someone else, then I would be the mastering engineer. I'm taking all of that into account, but I also have a real world where my clients have been listening to CD levels for so long, and they start to compare mixes that I do now to a CD, and trying to explain to the artist, well, that is a mastered CD and this is our mix, and we're going to eventually get to that point, but you're looking at a painted car when I'm trying to just show you the frame of the car. We're making decisions on where the lights and things should go on the car. They want a painted car as fast as possible. And that's really the reality of the world that we live in. So I do as much as I can to try to please my client, but I'm also allowing them to, well, asking them to trust me. And that sometimes comes with name, whereas, yeah, Bob isn't going to have a client say, okay, well, your mix is horrible, you have to give it to me this way, but it's Bob Clearmountain. I don't know if anybody else in this room has that luxury. You know, I have a little bit of that luxury from working overtime, people trusting me, but I still have to make my songs as loud as possible for my clients. And that's really the problem that we deal with. But when I do turn them in, I'm trying to hit -14 as an overall just level of where we are. I think -14 should be standardized. And I think jumping in between different streaming services, you know, the same way this is an open source thing. You know, at some point, someone came in and said, there should be a way for this keyboard to talk to this keyboard, and we created MIDI, and we created a whole system, and look how beautiful that is that we, you know, had something that was open source and got accepted. I think we are the people that can set that and say, -14, this is my suggestion, -14 should be that level, and we can standardize that. And then we've sort of won the loudness war of, we don't have to squash our records anymore to just keep making them louder on the CD. Because, you know, as technology moves, we need to move, and this is something that improves our music. We now have the dynamics back in music because of streaming, and it just makes my music sound so much better, or the music listening experience. It allows me to move speakers, you know, and that is the essence of what we're doing. The speakers, you know, not to get too technical, it's a transducer. It changes energy from one form to another, and if I get the chance to like make it move this way versus like this way, you know, I always tell my students it's almost like trying to punch someone and you only have a couple of inches to like punch, versus if I move my arm all the way back and then do this, I can hit you harder. It's like, it's not that difficult of a concept.
That's brilliant.
But again, I'm trying to say this for our real world engineers who are in rooms every day and are working and have to deal with this specific problem. You know, is there a world that has been developed now where sort of like the squashed, over limited sound is the sound of that thing? It's like, well, that's fine. You can do that artistically, but it shouldn't be done from a level standpoint. It should be strictly artistic, and then you can adjust that in a proper level.
So I want to mention one thing. When we're talking about limiting, we're talking about a dynamic process. When we're talking about crushing a mix bus, when we're talking about, well, you don't mind if I say you guys, push pushing the hell out of your master bus until it's nothing but square waves, you have a Metallica record. You listen to the kick drum on Death Magnetic, it's square waves. It's a little tiny little tick. And so one of the things that we're not in any way slouching towards, and we're absolutely recommending, is that you preserve peaks, because it gives you a lot of room later to, well, if you want to limit more later, you can.
Yes.
You know, if that's what your artist wants, that's okay. But if you clip up to that point, you've got the saturated Mona Lisa. You've taken that off the table. That's not an opportunity anymore. You've hit that red line on the top of Thomas's chart where it's so hot that playback codec, an MP3, or any normal DA converter is going to overshoot your ring and really screw up. So that's our pitch. And when you talk about minus 14 as a standard, what we could do here today is say minus 14 is our standard. Can I say that more clearly? Who does? Okay, let's have a vote. Who wants to go to minus 7? That's all the points that I really wanted to hit. And I know you guys have questions, and we'd like to invite your thoughts and questions. And
there's a microphone that they're recording. I wanted to say something contrary, though, to this. No, it's good. I mean, mixing is very hard. I think it's very, very hard. And
what, comedy is easy?
Yeah, right. And if you have a technique and you've done everything exactly as you wish now, and think, you know, pop music does demand some compression, and so there's absolutely a musical compression that's needed in pop music. And if your technique, after all is said and done, comes out a certain way and you're really happy with it, and you go measure it, it's at minus 12, say, don't worry about it, you know. We just turn it down 2 dB on Spotify, and Apple will turn it down 2.5 dB, even more than that, and it's all okay. So don't be crazy about it, like it. Don't reinvent your mixing technique for this. Just be aware of it, you know. But if you're done, and when you're going to start cranking things on just to hype the client, just think about it when you're doing it. You know?
I mean, make no mistake, we're all agreed, it still has to rock. You have to walk out of a mix with a rocking record. Or what's life for? You know?
For creative reasons, of course, that's all that matters. So in this case, if it sounds better that way with that compression, then by all means, but as Guru said also, don't do it just to try to get your loudness up, because you'll just be turned back down.
You'll be turned down?
Yeah, there's a part of when you're trying to impart certain information to the next generation, or when even using it yourself, that there's been so much discussion about loudness that I find that my students are completely missing the texture part of compression and using different compressors as texture. That's why there's so many different versions. So it's this thing of I don't necessarily do it just for a loudness purpose. I do have a certain sound that I love that comes from certain compressors, and you know. But it's, for me, it's more about texture than it is, you know, I grew up on that 4000 G center section, so, you know, my record doesn't sound like a record until it goes through that. That's just me. But it's the texture of it more than it is so much about the control. You know, I do hear, you know, Bob Clearmountain in my head, or like Tony Maserati in my head, like, hey, Guru, that's way too loud, you know, sort of thing. But, you know, everybody doesn't have those instructors in their life. So, you know, I think people are forgetting the beauty of texture for compressors, because all of my students are coming in and the information is so loud that I'm like, there's no way you're not even understanding what the plugin is doing, because that internal reference level for that plugin is minus 18 and you're like sitting at 0. So this doesn't even matter. Like you're never going to hear what whoever created that thing is trying to do, because your material is way too loud to start with. And it's just a simple concept of trying to get that across to people that have never been in a room with VU meters. And you know, this is the reality of what we're dealing with today. If you're teaching a 18-year-old, you know, he's never seen that. So I try to show them that. Or imagine walking into a room and someone's mixing your record and all the VU meters are just